Have you heard about School Incorporated? It's a new PBS series that looks at America's schools and schools around the world. It makes interesting points about what's wrong with our schools and what might be done about that. The series, though, is long. It's 3 hours. So here's my Stossel short attention span version.
Recognize this? It's the original Sony Walkman, introduced in 1979. The first mainstream personal music player. That was just the beginning. Every year or two, new and improved models hit the market. To earn enough to buy the original Walkman, you had to work 2 weeks at a typical minimum wage job. And that was for lo-fi sound on cassettes you had to flip over every half an hour. What's really amazing about the rapid spread and improvement of personal audio players is that it isn't amazing at all. It's perfectly normal. A decade ago, no one had ever heard of Google. Now they do tens of thousands of internet searches per second. Facebook went from 0 to 500 million members in just 5 years. Basically, invent something good, and it gets big. And these days, it gets big fast. But of all the products we make and the services we provide, there's one that stands out as an exception to that overall pattern. One activity in which excellence doesn't spawn countless imitators or spread on a massive scale. And that exception is schooling. For generations, there hasn't been a single innovation in teaching that has transformed classrooms and improved student achievement worldwide.
Why not? In America, the education establishment always says, we need more money to make schools better. But America's been trying that. We tripled spending on government-run schools over the past 50 years. And yet,
American test scores at the end of high school have been flat since we started keeping track of them all the way back in the early 1970s. Basically, educational quality has been stuck in the era of disco and leisure suits. And while our top athletes and pop stars reach huge audiences, our greatest teachers seldom reach more than a few dozen kids at a time. Why not? That's the question at the heart of this series.
Colson found some answers as to why the best teachers don't teach more kids at California's Garfield High.
By 1988, more students were passing the Advanced Placement Calculus test here at Garfield than at Beverly Hills High. 1 out of every 4 Mexican Americans who passed AP Calculus nationwide attended Garfield. Why?
Jaime Escalante.
Jaime Escalante.
Jaime Escalante.
Time, 3 seconds.
As a teacher, he was fantastic.
From the time he started teaching at Garfield in 1974, Jaime Escalante worked as if his life depended on the success of his students.
There was nothing but excellence expected of us students.
So we did not want to disappoint Jaime.
By 1982, the results were beyond belief. Literally, his students performed so far above expectations on the AP Calculus test that the Educational Testing Service suspected cheating and threw out their scores. Undaunted, they retook it and came through with flying colors a second time. Hollywood noticed, dramatizing the story in the movie Stand and Deliver.
This is basic math, but basic math is too easy for you burros.
Seeing the movie makes me laugh. It gives me a lot of memories of how it was in the classroom. He taught me everything I needed to be prepared for college.
In art as in life, Escalante had a simple message for his students. With enough drive and hard work, the sky was the limit.
When his students went to college, they found they were extra well prepared.
Every one of those classes that I took, there was always a subject that I had already learned in Mr. Jaime Escalante's class in high school.
Louder! A negative times negative equals a positive. Why?
The movie Stand and Deliver ends on a high note, with Escalante's students proving the skeptics wrong. But the story of his mathematics program at Garfield does not have a Hollywood ending.
Every single week, there was a new film crew coming in.
In any other field, we might expect this combination of success, scalability, and publicity to have catapulted Escalante to the top of his profession. Or like Hubble's expanding universe, to have spread all across the country. That just isn't what happened.
A lot of the teachers were resentful, and it was very public.
The key problem was that Escalante's classes were big.
He could handle it.
He was setting a precedent. He was giving the message to the administrator, if Escalante can do it, why not you?
So the teachers' union marshaled enough votes to oust Escalante as head of the math department.
Demoted and resented by many of his colleagues, Escalante left Garfield High. That's the bad news. The good news is that there are places where educational excellence is scaling up.
And so Colson went to some of those places: Sweden, Chile, London, India, Korea. In Korea,
the top teachers earn more than the highest paid professional baseball players.
My whole lecture revenue is over $100 million.
Really? $100 million. Colson and I will explain how that happens in the next video. The best school teachers making millions of dollars a year, making more than star baseball players. That's already happening in one country. It's something I learned from the PBS series School Incorporated. Here's part 2 of the Stossel shortened version of a documentary made by Andrew Colson.
Wouldn't it be great if the best teachers earned that same remuneration and that same recognition? Well, here in Korea, they do.
Mr. Choi is a national star. A lot of students have fallen in love with his lectures. In the past, students from outside Seoul had to come take these classes during vacation. But as internet technology improved, kids got the opportunity to listen to great lectures in the comfort of their own homes.
There aren't really many celebrity teachers, so we have to take online courses. He was like a celebrity to us, and he actually helped me with the subjects that I did not really do well on.
He helps a lot of people.
On average, over 100,000 students taking my lessons.
That's how he makes millions. And since these most popular teachers make the most money,
teachers compete within the market to become entertaining and educative at the same time,
Teachers competing to be entertaining and educational. That happens in the private education market. Government schools, they're different.
Public high schools, the salary is seniority based.
In government schools, the best teachers don't make more money. Mr. Choi is thankful for private schooling.
To be able to share the things that you know and get paid for doing that is actually a miracle.
America's private school sector is not yet that robust, but there are now some charter schools that do make a big difference.
One of Oakland's worst schools was gradually turned into the highest scoring school in California. Every racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic subgroup of students at these schools easily outperforms its statewide peers. And all of them beat the average for wealthier white students. The high school has topped the Washington Post's list of the nation's best.
Jamila transferred here in 7th grade. This charter school was very different from her government-run school.
It was just a really big transition because the school that I went to, they actually gave me a textbook and put us in the back of the classroom to learn and teach ourselves.
But the enemies of choice keep trying to kill off their competition. They fight charter schools, vouchers, school tax credits, education savings accounts. They say charter schools are unaccountable because they're not run by the state. But real accountability really comes from government regulators. Regulators may sleep on the job or take bribes or just follow meaningless rules. Real accountability happens when parents get to choose which school gets their money.
If there were no regulations at all, wouldn't some private schools try to take advantage of families? And wouldn't the most likely victims be children whose parents had little schooling themselves? Here in India, a lot of schools are taking advantage of poor families. Back in 1999, a team of researchers made surprise visits to schools around the country. In village after village, they found one type of school that consistently had the worst facilities and the least learning. Most had leaking roofs, and barely any had drinking water. And if you're wondering why anyone would pay for that kind of service, it turns out there's a good reason. They have to. The findings I just described are for public schools.
That is what happens in the government schools. The teachers, there isn't anyone who's going to be held accountable.
This teacher talked with a public school teacher.
I said that, oh, so what's been going on with you? And she said, oh, I managed to get a government job. My life is set. And I said, well, set in what ways? She said, well, I'm never going to be fired. This is a job for life and it pays me well. And I don't even have to go. She hasn't been to school for last year and a half since she was posted there.
Colson then interviews British education professor James Tooley. Tooley traveled the world to research how the poorest people educate kids. He went to the slums of India.
And I found something which changed my life. I found a private school, a low-cost private school. In those days, charging the equivalent of about $1 per month. I found one, and then a second, and a third. And soon I found this federation of low-cost private schools.
When he told his fellow educators about that, they dismissed his discovery.
What you found is a couple of businessmen ripping off the poor. And anyway, it's only happening in Hyderabad in India. We know about it. It's a small thing, you know. And I thought, ripping off the poor, but that's not what I've seen there. I've seen dedicated entrepreneurs who are running schools. They come in on their weekends and run science fairs. You think, okay, this must be charity. Maybe the mosques are supporting them. Some NGO, some non-government organization is supporting them. When you see 5, 10, 15, and you hear of 500 of these schools, you realize that can't be the case. There has to be a financially sustainable business model. I talked to a lot of parents. I said, you know, you're poor, you know. Why are you spending money on the private schools when the government schools are free? I'll never forget. One said, in the government schools, our children are abandoned. And sure enough, I went to see one of these government schools. 130 children sitting on the floor. It's a government school just around the corner from here. 130 children, all bright-eyed, eager to learn, eager to welcome this stranger in their midst, doing nothing, abandoned.
There are government school regulators. Tooley interviewed them, and they admitted that they take bribes.
They were quite upfront about it. They came, they sat in the office, they sat in a comfortable desk, they took the money, they didn't even bother to look in the school. They had a nice cup of hot chai, and off they went.
Dozens of scientific studies have now looked at these budget private schools in India and elsewhere. And what most of them find is that private schools are outperforming government schools that spend 3 or 4 times as much per pupil.
These parents care about their schooling. They said, why are there only 10 computers? Why was a teacher absent last week? They care. They're paying money, and because they're paying, they will keep the schools accountable. That's a very important thing which you mess with at your peril.
That's just a sample of Andrew Colson's 3-part PBS series, School Inc. You can watch the whole thing on the Free to Choose Network's YouTube page. Unfortunately, Colson did not live to see his documentary finished. He died while completing it. School Inc. is a wonderful memorial to him and his fine work.
Hello and welcome. This is Mostly Weekly, and I'm vigorously Andrew Heaton. And this week, we're going to talk about sports. The time we all gather around to watch a muscular stranger put a regulation-sized ball in a specific location. I love the sports. My favorite sports team is the Denver Lemons. But even a die-hard sports person like me knows
publicly funded sports are overvalued.
I just mean that sports bravado is driving up taxes and tuitions and killing local economies. How? Let's play the balls. Sports mania drives up taxes through stadiums. Major League Soccer is adding 2 new teams to the league, and major U.S. cities are bidding to get them. But, much like a YouTube comments argument, it's more costly to win. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. The winner will likely have to pay $200 million for a stadium, and the winner is the U.S. taxpayer, most of whom think MLS is a genetic disorder. But just listen to these local politicians talk about it.
World-class stadium and a contributor to the economy within the city and the state.
And stadiums will cure cancer and be filled with candy and bring grandma back to life. But every issue has 2 sides. Here are the pros and cons of stadium subsidies as I see them debated. Con, taxpayers will cover at least half of a $200 million stadium plus maintenance. Pro, sports! Con, stadiums literally only benefit sports fans. Non-sports fans or nerds get no return on their tax dollars. Pro, sports! Con, Major League Soccer is a Ponzi scheme. It's been losing money every year, but the estimated valuation has increased fourfold since 2008. Pro, sports! So remember, if you build it, they will come, completely destroy your economy. Sports mania drives up tuition costs. College football season starts this week, and you know what that means? It means universities are going to continue subsidizing their athletic programs. Rutgers, for instance, charges $1,000 in student fees, or about 8% of total tuition, to subsidize their sports teams. Other schools charge as high as 23% of their total tuition to subsidize their athletic programs. How do they get away with it? They bury it deep within the student fees. Most school athletic programs cost the university money. In 2010, Division I schools spent over $91,000 per student athlete. That's 7 times the amount they spent on regular non-athlete students. Well, at least those lucky student athletes are making bank. What's that? They don't get paid? Okay, right. Well, at least those lucky student athletes are graduating in droves. Only 55% graduate? Really? What's that? I don't have an earpiece? Sports mania depresses economies. Los Angeles was just chosen as the site of the 2028 Olympics, which is great news for that guy who still owns a vuvuzela. Los Angeles has already pledged to spend $5 billion, but don't worry, the anticipated revenue is $6 billion, to be split evenly with the International Olympic Committee. But what's a net loss of $2 billion between friends? And this is assuming that the games will really only cost $5 billion when it cost $20 billion in London and $40 billion in Beijing. Saying the Olympics will only cost $5 billion is like in sports. You know when a hockey lineman is like, I'm totally going to wicket that, and then when push comes to shove, ice. Just look at the ruins of Athens. No, not those ruins, these ruins. That's just 10 years after the 2004 Summer Games, and now most of the facilities have been abandoned. And in general, sports franchises have a negative impact on per capita income. So sports mania drives up tuition and taxes and depresses local economies. How do we fix it? By getting passionate about fiscal responsibility. I know it looks bad out there. The economics are bleak, but you gotta go out with clear eyes and balanced checkbooks and love in your hearts. And by love, I mean cash. By hearts, I mean accounts. Now, I may not know much. I'm just a recovering alcoholic and former athlete with a colorful backstory trying to get his kids back. But I know this. You gotta have cash to spend cash. You gotta think about the future to have a future. Money's gonna save you. You gotta save money. You gotta talk in one order. Then reverse the order you talk. Now get out there and stop spending taxpayer money. Go, go, go! I'm Coach Heaton. Thanks for watching Mostly Weekly.
Venezuela's dictator dances. Right outside, people suffer and die. It's so cruel and unnecessary. Venezuela should be rich. Not long ago, Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America. It still has greater oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. But today, Venezuelans starve. These people are fighting over bags of flour.
No hay alimentos, no hay nada.
And then there's the violence. One Venezuelan is murdered every 20 minutes. So are American celebrities who praised Hugo Chávez's People's Revolution now embarrassed by what they said? Will they admit they were wrong? Leftist intellectual Noam Chomsky fawned over Chávez, said he's made a better world.
See how a better world is being created and can speak to the person who's inspired it.
Actor Sean Penn met with Chávez and said this.
He's done, for the moment, incredible things for the 80% of the people that are very poor there.
Actor Danny Glover did some playful boxing and hugging with Chávez. Then he praised his vision for humanity. Michael Moore claimed Chavez eliminated 75% of extreme poverty. Come on, Michael. Chavez added to extreme poverty.
Who is Hugo Chavez?
Director Oliver Stone made this insipid film celebrating Chavez and Latin American socialism.
Take an incredible look at an extraordinary movement.
Pela primeira vez, os pobres estão sendo tratados como seres humanos.
No, they're not. Now they starve and fear they'll be killed. Model Naomi Campbell went to Venezuela and said, "I'm amazed to see the love for the social programs." We asked all of them if they'd talk about their love of Chavez. Only one responded, Noam Chomsky. His anti-capitalist teachings have misled millions of students, but they've worked for Chomsky. After he praised Chavez's sharp poverty reduction, Chavez returned the favor by holding up Chomsky's book at the UN. That made it a bestseller. So is Chomsky now ashamed of his praise? No, he wrote me. He said at the time he praised Chavez, Venezuela had seen a remarkable reduction in poverty. He cited this Harvard Magazine article. But this was written by a leftist who helped write Oliver Stone's movie. So I asked Chomsky, given the current crisis in Venezuela, should you now say to the students who've learned from you, socialism wrecks people's lives? Chomsky wrote me back, I never described Chavez's state capitalist government as socialist. Private capitalism remained. Capitalists were free to undermine the economy in all sorts of ways, like massive export of capital. What? Capitalists exported capital and undermined the economy by abandoning their homes and fleeing across the border to Colombia?
Thousands of Venezuelans cross daily in search of food, medicine, and work.
These people are socialist fools. Useful idiots, Lenin would have called them. As much as I'd enjoy rubbing their noses in their stupidity now, I cannot rejoice because I know Venezuela's descent into chaos will not be the last time we hear of a dying socialist economy. Socialism failed in all these places. We are yet to see one socialist country succeed. And yet, sadly, they and other countries refuse to learn the lessons of history. Other countries will give socialism a go. Useful idiots will sing socialism's praises until the last light goes out.
The collapse of Venezuela's economy is both horrifying and predictable, and the world needs to understand why. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, and it was once Latin America's richest country.
Caracas, the swinging city of Venezuela. Good climate, fine buildings, wide highways with plenty on them. All in all, a pretty nice place to be for many reasons.
Today, most grocery store shelves are empty, and Venezuelans are so hungry that they're killing zoo animals for sustenance. Toilet paper, diapers, and toothpaste are luxury goods. Venezuelan hospitals have disintegrated. Children are dying because they can't get antibiotics, and the infant mortality rate is higher than Syria's. The capital city of Caracas is the murder capital of the world, and just 12% of citizens feel safe walking alone at night, which is the lowest figure reported in the world. The government blames slumping oil prices for the desperate situation, but the real cause is the socialist economy. The government sets the price of staples such as rice, pasta, and flour, resulting in chronic shortages. Former President Hugo Chavez nationalized industries, confiscated property, and kicked out foreign companies. The government is trying to print its way out of the crisis, resulting in a 700% annual inflation rate. After a sham election, President Nicolas Maduro, the hand-picked successor of Chavez, is rounding up his opponents and putting them in jail. Despite this, Maduro and his predecessors still have their defenders, ranging from Sean Penn to Michael Moore to Naomi Klein, who once signed a petition saying, "We would vote for Hugo Chavez," and praised the autocrat in 2007
for creating a zone of relative economic calm and predictability. In 2013, journalist David Sirota praised Hugo Chavez's economic miracle, writing that the socialist leader had a record that a legacy-obsessed American president could only dream of achieving. But the real lesson of Venezuela's tragic collapse is that real socialism always leads to economic breakdown and political repression. Those of us in wealthier, freer countries need to keep Venezuela in mind as we confront calls for more regulation and government control of all aspects of our lives.
Hello, I'm parenthetically Andrew Heaton, and you're watching Mostly Weekly. And today we're going to talk about patent trolls. They're like regular trolls, only balder, paler, and prone to lawsuits. Patents are the legal equivalent of dibs or a temporary monopoly that the government awards to inventors so that after they've developed a new technology, they're rewarded for their efforts. But patent trolls are gaming the system, to the point that the patent system is holding back innovation instead of encouraging it. Patent trolls buy or register stupid or vague patents. Then, when someone invents something awesome, they claim the inventor is using their patent and they sue. That creates a minefield where inventors are afraid to create things for fear they'll step on a patent and blow their legs off. Trolls cost U.S. firms $29 billion in lawsuits every year, and the threat of lawsuits strangles startups and hampers innovation. Like this, or this, it's good for Father's Day, or this, that's a good Valentine's Day present, or this, Christmas. To be awarded a patent, an inventor is supposed to create a new idea which is novel and not just an obvious improvement over an existing idea. Like this. The U.S. Patent Office doesn't nitpick every moron's application, so patent trolls file broad, vague, and weak applications that they can use as flimsy pretenses to lob lawsuits at people. For example, this is an actual patent. It's patented as thermal refreshening of a bread product. Oh, you mean toast? You can't patent friggin' toast! Or this, method of concealing partial baldness. That's a comb-over. You didn't invent comb-overs. If you think toast and comb-overs are overly broad, you're right, you score a point. Which is also a patent. Apple and Samsung had a patent dispute over who owned rectangles with rounded edges. Quit fighting about quadrilaterals. Just build me a robot butler already. For years, patent trolls filed their frivolous lawsuits in East Texas, partly because East Texas was more friendly to patent lawsuits, and also because it's irritating to have to fly to East Texas. So defendants, much like a substitute teacher in her late 30s, are inclined to settle, which is exactly what the trolls want. In the recent case of TC Heartland versus Kraft Foods, the Supreme Court ruled that patent lawsuits must be filed wherever the defendant is, which is a big blow to patent trolls. Meanwhile, other patent troll victims have started fighting back. Personal Audio LLC sued Adam Carolla for podcasting, which they claim to own the patent for. Rather than ponying up extortion money, Carolla raised $500,000 through podcasting and threw in another $200,000 of his own to fight them in court. We don't know what the settlement was, but I imagine they didn't make very much money, and they'll probably think twice about trying to extort the podcast community again. Which means I can now fearlessly release my Pogcast, which is a podcast about pogs. Hey, remember pogs? Finally, a guy named Alexander Reben developed an algorithm that spits out tens of thousands of invention ideas every day. If a troll patents something in the future and sues someone, the defendant can point to the millions and millions of Reben's ideas that predate it. And some of those ideas are brilliant. Like a shoe tree for one shoe, and a pineapple lily plant that can track people. That's innovation. Trolls are on the run, but there's one major step we can take to hobble them. What do trolls fear most? Commitment, obviously, everyone knows that. But after that, fee shifting. Fee shifting means whoever loses the court case pays for all of the legal fees. It's what they do in Canada and Britain, although we only do it for exceptional cases in the United States. If you knew you'd have to pay yours and the defendant's fees if you lost a frivolous patent case, you'd be less likely to register it in the first place. On my end, I'm going to file a patent for being an extortionist dickhead so I can sue the pants off some patent trolls. And that'll show them how the... And apparently the patent for ironic patents has already been patented, so that's great. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a court date, but not for patent violations, for murder.
Do you have a license? You better. Government often demands licenses before you're allowed to work. People think this is a good idea. We license drivers, we license dogs. People think it makes us safer. But licensing also does something bad.
If people want to work, let them work.
11-year-old Madison Root was told she could not work because she didn't have a license. She wanted money for braces, so she tried selling mistletoe. Here she is in a tree, picking it. But when she went to sell it at this outdoor market, police told her, stop, that's illegal. They told her she could beg, but she can't sell anything. So her father sent us this video.
I was amazed that people cannot work hard, but they can be just lazy.
I assume that's not exactly what the cops meant, but the fact is, all over America, people want to work but can't because it's so hard to get proper licenses.
In the 1950s, well, only about 1 in 20 Americans needed the government's blessing to do their job. Today, that number is more than 1 in 3.
This new book, Bottleneckers, reveals how licensing rules allow older businesses to profit by keeping newcomers out.
These are people who want to erect barriers, who want to put in place bottlenecks because they want to keep competitors out.
It's kind of like what happens on a highway if you close a lane. The established existing businesses are like these motorcycles. Licenses don't slow them down. During my consumer reporter days, I assumed licenses protected us from scams like these.
We are not ripping people off.
But licensing doesn't stop that. Georgia funeral director who was pitching dead bodies out in the woods behind his funeral establishment. He was licensed. Bernie Madoff was licensed. Teachers in public schools who have sex with their students, licensed. Licensing doesn't stop that.
What licensing does do is crush new entrepreneurs. Want to braid people's hair? This woman was told she couldn't do it legally unless she spent thousands of hours to get a cosmetology license. She begged the government, just let me braid.
I was making these phone calls to the Board of Cosmetology saying, I don't want to do cosmetology. All I want to do is braid hair.
No, not without our license, said the Cosmetology Board.
These are people who have a clear conflict of interest.
Of course they do. She wants to compete with them.
Cosmetologists got together and they went to the legislature and they lobbied for the creation of a license.
Makes me wonder, how could I get rid of my competition? I'm annoyed by all these TV channels. I'd like to limit that.
Yes, I'm sure. So what you need to do, John, is that you need to go to the government and ask for special protection. You need to claim that there's some public interest, some way that the public is going to be protected by limiting the number of providers.
And that actually happened in America. When I started in TV, most viewers just had ABC, CBS, NBC, and boring public television. People could have had many more channels. Cable TV technology was available. But lobbyists for my employer argued, no, that'll hurt poor people. They need broadcast TV. They can't afford cable. So the FCC limited cable TV for years. And that helped me make more money.
Certainly it does. That's the effect of licensing. That is, the people who are in the industry have the ability to artificially inflate prices and their wages as a result, and consumers are worse off.
I was better off.
You were much better off, but now we realize everyone else was worse off.
That's what the bottleneck does. It limits choices, thereby raising prices and enriching older businesses. There are so many bottlenecks. We'll show you a bunch in the next episodes. We'll also show you how these problems can be better solved by the free market.
Market regulation actually is enough for the vast majority of occupations out there.
Bottleneckers around America. They make life worse for you. To get our eyes tested, we've always had to go to an optometrist, and that can be a pain. But now, maybe we don't have to go.
Is it the quick and cheap alternative that you've been looking for?
Welcome to your online eye exam.
A company called Opternative is an optometry alternative, claims it has a new online eye exam that's as good as an in-person exam.
We'll measure how clearly you see. Take 11 heel-to-toe steps away from your computer. Gently cover your left eye and press the button to begin.
It's hard to believe that this could replicate what optometrists do, but the author of the book Bottleneckers, who researched this exam, says it is just as good as an in-person exam.
At least as good and sometimes better, some researchers indicate.
How could it be better? It's over the internet.
This is the beauty of technology.
Select the square with the sharper lines.
You look at the computer while following instructions on your cell phone. Optometrist Stephen Lee founded Opternative. In this TED Talk, he explains that he did it because a patient complained about how difficult it was to get to his office.
She'd skip work and waste most of her day to spend just a few minutes with me. That's when she stopped me. She said, "Dr. Lee, why can't we just do this at home?"
So he invented a way to do that.
Select which character looks different.
All you need is a computer and a smartphone. That's it.
This is really foolhardy and really dangerous.
The American Optometric Association says a home test is unacceptably risky because no optometrist is there to look for diseases. So I said to the company's spokesman, sick people are not going to be diagnosed.
Sick people are not allowed to take the exam.
Well, how do you stop them? You ask them questions?
Absolutely. Just like you would be done in your optometrist's office. Optometrist is not going to be able to screen you for diabetes. They can't take a blood test.
The Alternative computer program does ask you medical questions. If the program suspects you have a disease, the company won't give you a prescription, refers you to an eye doctor.
It is a tool that allows you to take a test or be screened. Those results are then reviewed by a licensed ophthalmologist.
Not good enough, says the Optometric Association. They want to force everyone to go to an eye doctor. They're the bottlenecker here, and they've persuaded 13 states to draft bills banning at-home tests.
Groups of doctors that basically said, patients like yourself should not have the right to make any choices in your vision care.
Bottleneckers like the optometrists have clout in legislatures because they give the politicians money. When South Carolina's legislature banned the at-home test, then Governor Nikki Haley spoke up for the patients. She vetoed the ban. She said it was anti-competitive, and it is.
But the legislature was so beholden to the optometrists that they overrode her veto.
It's as if car makers got together and got laws passed forcing all of us to buy the most expensive cars.
But often consumers don't want all Cadillacs. Sometimes they're satisfied with a Chevrolet.
Many Americans never visit any eye doctor. This test at least gives all of us a choice.
What is right? Forbidding a person from seeing unless they first allow you to invasively test their eyes?
Please hold your phone at a normal reading distance.
I didn't have to go through an invasive test.
Your prescription is in sight.
In a few days, I got this prescription, which turned out to be the same prescription I get for my expensive eye doctor. And I paid just $50. On average, optometrists in my town charge $95. It's good to have a choice. These glasses were the correct prescription for less money. The optometry lobby doesn't want us to have that choice? No, they don't. Bottleneckers make life worse for you. Have a gun license? Plan to bring your gun to my hometown next time you fly in?
Pack all unloaded firearm and firearm parts in a locked, hard-sided container.
If you call the TSA, they will tell you, put the gun in a locked container and
notify the airline during the ticket counter check-in process.
But even if you do this properly, New York authorities will still wreck your life.
I declared my gun, because I always do. I fly in and out all over the U.S. with it.
Patricia Jordan carries her gun for protection. She correctly followed all the TSA procedures when she flew from her home in Georgia to New York City.
It's in a TSA case, everything's separate, it's locked.
She was traveling with 3 teenage girls and wanted her gun in her hotel room.
I know that if something happens, then I can protect myself.
I was glad that she had brought it just in case something did happen.
On their way home, Patricia did everything correctly again. The airline counter, she again told the agent she wanted to check her gun. But this time she was told, wait.
The next thing I know, they're getting ready to arrest me.
For what exactly?
For having a gun. I thought I was going to pass out. I really did. I have my permit. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to right.
Of course, I started freaking out.
She sat there and begged the lady, please don't arrest my mom, please don't arrest my mom. She's like crying, begging her not to take me.
The police put Patricia in jail and told her, you've committed a felony.
The minimum was 3.5 to 7 years mandatory prison for this.
Another visitor, Avi Wolf, was jailed just for having a gun part, an empty magazine. There were no bullets. It's just something like this.
It was exactly like that. Instead of a plastic exterior, mine had a little bit of a different make to it, but it was exactly that. Somebody could have done more damage to an individual with a fork from McDonald's than with that.
Wolf, too, checked with the TSA beforehand. They told him, just declare it to TSA agents at security.
I'm telling them that. Just notification, I have a magazine here. It's empty, there's no bullets, there's no gunpowder. It's, I called TSA before doing it, and this is what they told me to do, was to declare it. The next thing I know, they pull me over to the side, and they're all like, do you know what you have in your bag? And I'm like, I know what I have in my bag. I told you what I have in my bag. Fast forward about an hour, it was four Port Authority police officers are there. The chief of LaGuardia Airport is there. They thought they found somebody trying to do 9/11 repeat.
For this?
Literally, for that. They asked me if I had a gun license. Of course, I had a gun license. I'm from Georgia, and everybody there's got a gun license. And they're like, well, sir, you're going to be getting arrested now. I'm like, oh, no.
The other prisoners couldn't believe why Avi was in jail.
One guy beat up his wife. This other guy is busted with a whole bunch of drugs. She's like, so what did you do? Why are you here? It's like, I got caught at security with an empty magazine.
What'd they say?
Just laughed at it. It's a joke.
But it was no joke. Avi and Patricia were released after a day in jail, but they still faced that felony charge.
I could barely function. I had to get on anxiety medicine. I was throwing up every day.
Months later, New York allowed each to plead guilty to a lesser charge, public disorder. But it cost each $15,000 in legal fees. Why does New York City do this to people? They need to spend a day in jail?
We get them through the system as quick as we can.
District Attorney Jack Ryan handles New York Airport gun charges.
We're not going to apologize for enforcing our gun laws. We do enforce them fairly and humanely and as compassionately as we can.
Is it a fair system when it costs them $15,000, $17,000 and they spend a day in jail?
It's as fair as we can make it under all of those circumstances.
Even in Avi's case? It's an empty piece of plastic.
Whether the magazine is made out of plastic, Kevlar, or metal, I think is immaterial. It's a question of how many bullets it holds. That's why New York has banned them.
Isn't what's material is whether it held any bullets? It didn't. It was empty.
You can discuss that with the legislature. They didn't make it a crime only if there's bullets in it. They made it a crime.
Patricia had carefully separated her gun from her bullets.
The officer could not even find my bullets in my suitcase. I had to stop and go show her where they were. But yet they said that this was considered a loaded weapon in New York.
Under New York law, if they're together, they're loaded. And so we have prosecuted a number of those cases.
Loaded even if they're not loaded?
If the weapon and the ammunition are together, they're loaded.
Most every week, New York jails someone who innocently travels with a gun, legally licensed in their state.
These are people who are trying to do everything right. They go on the TSA website. They follow the regulations to fly with their gun. They go on the airline website and they follow the regulations to properly fly with their gun.
And then New York jails them. You're a sadistic bully locking these people up. These aren't threats.
We know they're not threats after we check them out. We do not know who they are when we first talk to them.
Give me a break. Prosecutors have discretion. They could be reasonable with these poor people who had no idea that they'd violated New York's strange laws. But New York politicians don't want you to have a gun, so they will put you in jail to send everyone a message.
Way downtown, he's in the jailhouse now. He's in the jailhouse.
Here it is. This little building is a $2 million bathroom. $2 million? I had to check it out. I was expecting gold-plated fixtures. It's just a toilet, couple urinals, 2 sinks, $2 million? Do the people who use this park know what taxpayers paid for their bathroom? What should something like this cost?
A couple thousand.
70,000, approximately 100,000 maybe. Or maybe
They spent $2 million.
for this, unbelievable.
Wow. Wow.
You could buy a nice house here for $2 million.
Price, yeah. You could buy a big house here.
You can. This nearby house was advertised for much less. It has 6 bedrooms.
In the millions for this? This is ridiculous. Where does the money go?
Good question. Everything costs more when government builds it. Washington, D.C.'s visitor center was supposed to cost $265 million. It ended up costing $600 million. The Veterans Affairs Medical Center near Denver was projected to cost $590 million. Now they estimate $1.7 billion. Government spends more because every decision is tied up in endless rules. Minority outreach, wheelchair access, zoning rules, and much more. Your department puts out a statement. The current estimate to build a new bathroom is $3 million.
It is now approaching, in some cases, going over $3 million.
Mitchell Silver is New York's Parks Commissioner.
This is the most expensive market in the world.
So $2 million was a good deal here?
$2 million was a good deal. We build these conference stations to last.
But you can buy whole houses in that neighborhood for less than what you spent on this bathroom.
I hear that point often, and if you look at the material that we use compared to a home, these are very, very durable material.
That's nice. But this bathroom is made of durable materials too. It's so beautiful that a newspaper said it might be the fanciest in New York. Yet it cost 1/5 as much. Why? Well, it's in nearby Bryant Park, and Bryant Park is privately managed. Bryant Park built one with just as many sinks and toilets for 1/5 the price.
Bryant Park did a renovation. When we build our conference stations, we do it from the ground up.
But why?
Why'd they knock down the old one? It just looks the same thing.
Commissioner Silver says this has to be especially sturdy because
we're going to expect thousands, if not hundreds and thousands of visitors in that facility over its life cycle.
But privately run Bryant Park gets more use. No comparison. It's so busy, people wait in line to get in. Yet another reason government work costs more is that government pays more.
We pay prevailing wage, so we...
Prevailing wage.
Prevailing wage.
Union wage.
This is a city that does believe strongly in labor, and they want to make sure that people get paid a prevailing wage.
Prevailing wage turns out to mean union wages, sometimes more than $100 an hour. That makes everything cost more. And when we watched, the workers didn't seem to work very hard. The final reason this costs so much is that it took years to build it. It took less time to build the Empire State Building.
We've now saved 5 months out of what used to be 4 years, 5 years for a project. We're now doing them 3 years, in some cases under. So we've shaved 5 years off.
Whoop-de-doo. So instead of 5 years, it's 4.5 years? That's still terrible.
So actually, we're 3 years, and now we just finished one of our projects in under 3 years.
Why does it take you 3 years to build a bathroom?
We have a process that includes design, procurement, and construction.
But so does the private sector.
Ours, because it's a public project, we believe very strongly in engaging the public.
Engaging the public means things like the city planning department's uniform land use review procedure. Try doing something quickly while following these rules.
Clearly, private sector does not have to go through that same process.
And this is a good thing, the public process? All these meetings?
Oh, yes, it's a good thing.
That's a ridiculous amount of money.
One little building, $2 million. That's government at work.
rejoicing morning when the trumpet God shall sound. We shall rise, we shall rise. Then the saints will come rejoicing and no tears will ever be found. We shall rise, we shall rise.
We shall rise. Rhinos are going extinct.
A race against time to save the rhinos.
Poachers massacre rhinos for their horns. Some are carved into ornaments. Some are ground up and sold for medicine. Just one of these can sell for as much as $300,000. It's no wonder.
Around 500 rhinos have been slain by poachers in South Africa so far this year.
Poaching became the biggest business.
The upcoming documentary Hornmaker features entrepreneur Matt Marcus, who says he has a solution to poaching. Create more rhino horns, artificial horn, then flood the market with that.
One way to devalue something is actually to create a lot of it.
There'd be no incentive to poach anymore.
That's correct. And when things are abundant, people don't fight, kill, or steal.
South Africa once tried something similar. For 20 years, they made it legal to own rhinos and sell their horns. Farmers would put the rhinos to sleep with tranquilizer darts, saw off their horns, and sell the horn. Because this was legal, rhino farmers had an incentive to breed rhinos and protect them. The rhino population quadrupled, but then South Africa banned sales of rhino horn again. Poaching went down?
No, it went up. It went up by thousands of percent.
And there are fears that the rhino could be extinct within 10 years.
So Marcus's idea, artificial horn, might save the rhino. I would think the people who want to preserve wildlife would love this idea.
I would think they'd love it too.
But no. All these environmental groups hate his idea.
This is dangerous. What they're doing is absolutely dangerous for rhinos
Why?
and their survival. This is greenwashing, an illegal activity.
Legal sales, say environmental groups, might increase rhino killing. That happened once with elephants.
That started up new carving industry in China that had been dormant for decades.
It needs to be long enough to bring the prices down. And then people say, there's no money in poaching.
So the problem is that people still perceive animals as commodities, as natural resources
What's wrong
for their
with that?
use.
Yeah, they are.
Well, they have inherent value.
I eat eggs. That's a commodity from a chicken. What's wrong with that?
Are we really going to now just farm every single animal on this planet so we can endlessly continue supplying this like bloodlust and thirst of people to consume wildlife products?
If that's what it takes to preserve the animals, your bans have failed. Last year, Kenya burned 100 tons of confiscated elephants and rhino horns. Poaching is up. 1,000 park rangers have been killed by poachers. Your ban is cruel to people and animals.
The increase in poaching is a direct responsibility of the folks in China and Vietnam that are pushing this product onto innocent consumers.
So sell them a substitute cheap product and this will stop. You people have your head in the sand.
But a cheap product that does nothing. Organizations like mine are partnering with the Vietnamese government to reduce demand for rhino horn.
And failing.
No, we're succeeding. That's the thing. So we've reached about 40 million Vietnamese in the last 3 years.
Reach means 40 million people supposedly saw her public relations campaign.
Please help protect my family from rhino poachers.
A Humane Society survey found videos like this persuaded many people that rhino horns have no medical value.
Don't use rhino horn. It cannot make you healthy.
So what? People are still poaching the rhinos.
So it takes time. It takes time for that trickle-down effect.
It's fine if environmental groups try to convince people not to buy rhino horn, but their hostility to capitalism makes them blind to better ideas like artificial horn and South Africa's new plan to legalize horn sales again.
South Africa is going against the international body that's fighting to protect rhinos.
So what? These international bodies are stupid.
No, well, there are folks like me that work to pass these restrictions.
But it's like the drug war. You can ban it, but if there's money to be made, the poachers are still going to kill the animals. Prohibition should have taught us that when something's valuable, banning its consumption leads to lawbreaking and killing. Nobody kills anybody anymore for beer or wine or scotch.
When you're talking about beer or wine or scotch, you don't have lives on the line.
Lives of the people who were killed by Al Capone.
Well, of course, but you know, he was a criminal and you have criminal networks
Only
here.
a criminal because alcohol was illegal.
Yeah, I mean, this is a endless argument. We can't live in a lawless society.
A free society is not a lawless society. Markets are not lawless. Legal rhino farming or selling fake corn could save endangered animals. But the environmental groups just can't see that. What's happening with your tax money? President Trump said, I'm going to cut some departments.
We are proposing a budget that will shrink the bloated federal bureaucracy.
But that didn't happen. Quietly, Congress increased spending on the very departments Trump wanted to cut. Important sounding agencies like the Agriculture Department, which raises the question. What's the Agriculture Department do?
Should he do a bunch of things?
No one I asked knew.
What does agriculture do? FDA?
No. 3/4 of the money goes for programs like food stamps, and lots of that is wasted. Billions went to dead people. And billions more go for corporate welfare, farm subsidies. Years ago, politicians said government must help farmers to make sure America has an ample food supply.
And the whole thing is a big boondoggle which gives some farmers subsidies, but the vast majority of farmers don't get subsidized, and it still gets grown.
Yes, somehow we always have enough vegetables and fruit, crops that don't get subsidies. The subsidies mostly go to grain and corn farmers. The richest farmers get most of the handouts.
What they're really doing is taking from the private sector and they're giving it to special interests.
And yet at the same time, the government demands other farmers grow less. To prop up cherry prices, the department told this farmer, destroy your crop.
He had to dump 40,000 pounds of perfectly good cherries on the ground and let them rot. The result is we have fewer cherries and we have to pay more for existing cherries. That's not helping.
Other cabinet departments are just as wasteful. What about the Commerce Department? What do they do?
I have no idea.
No one did. The department's biggest spending item is supporting the global warming science complex.
The ice is also thinning at an alarming rate.
The Commerce Department spends your money at an alarming rate. They bought a $300,000 yacht, which the bureaucrats use to go fishing. The department also gives money to companies that have tech problems. They claim every dollar generates 30.
They take $1 and then they get $30 of benefits for society. All we need to do is take more of your dollar and we get 30 times the amount. The unseen is if we're not spending that dollar, that's being taken from the economy too. So if we spend that dollar, why doesn't that become $30? It is the biggest Ponzi scheme example logic I've ever heard of.
And think about just this idea of a commerce department. When one of the founders was asked about creating the department, he said, for heaven's sake, what's meant by a government chamber of commerce? Commerce just happens. We don't need a commerce department.
Total team back. Thank you, sir.
Why don't we just let people do what they want to do, interact freely?
Wouldn't that be nice? But that's not what's happening. Under Democrats and Republicans, government grows.